There's something evil in the woods. I've seen it. I created this account and am posting here because I need help figuring out what to do. I mean, deep down I know what I should do, but I'm conflicted. Part of me worries no one will believe me. My family, including myself, at least until recently, has always been made up of passionate outdoors people. We hike, hunt, fish, camp, canoe, kayak, you name it. If it's outdoors, we've probably done it. My brothers, sisters, cousins, grandparents, pretty much everyone in my extended family is into nature and wilderness. We especially love autumn and winter activities like cross-country skiing and snowshoeing, and I've always truly enjoyed that lifestyle. Naturally, when you spend a lot of time out in the wilderness, you see and hear some strange things. Sometimes animals startle you. Sometimes your brain tries to make sense of something unfamiliar and comes up with strange explanations. I've always been a skeptic when it comes to anything supernatural. I've never believed in ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot, conspiracy theories, none of it. I've always assumed those things are just how the mind tries to fill in gaps when it doesn't have all the facts. But I need to be clear here. What I experienced wasn't just my brain making up a story. I'm not being paranoid. This wasn't a figment of my imagination. I saw it. Only once, maybe twice, but I know it's followed me before. This most recent encounter confirmed it. It wasn't just me being spooked. This was real. As for when it started, that's hard to say. Honestly, it might go back as far as I can remember, but I've never been sure which moments were just my imagination and which ones were real. It's only in the last 5 years or so that things have started happening more frequently and more intensely. That's when I really began to worry. Like I said, strange things happen in forests and mountains, and I used to dismiss it as part of being outdoors. But these last 5 years have been different. I'll share some specific experiences, but for now, I want to be careful about revealing exact locations. There's a reason for that, which I'll explain later. For some context, I live in Montana with my wife, and we do most of our outdoor adventuring throughout this region, including parts of Alberta and British Columbia. My uncle on my mom's side owns a piece of property here in Montana, and there's a cabin on it that's become a favorite spot for that side of the family. We go out there often, whether it's to hike, snowshoe in the winter, or just spend a peaceful weekend surrounded by nature. On this particular trip, my wife, who was still my girlfriend at the time, and I had planned a 3-day weekend getaway to the cabin with my sister and her husband. It was late autumn, almost early winter, and we figured we'd take advantage of the weather to explore the trails before snow made the area too difficult to get around without snowshoes or skis. It was supposed to be a normal trip. We arrived, unloaded our gear, and spent that Friday evening just enjoying ourselves. There was already a light dusting of snow here and there, but it wasn't too cold yet, just enough for some heavier jackets and maybe a hat or scarf. We had a fire going that night, roasted a few things, shared stories. Everything felt totally ordinary. Nothing out of place, nothing that made me feel uneasy. Just a typical, relaxing night in the woods. The next day is when my feelings about the outdoors started to shift. That morning was a slow one. We cooked breakfast in the cabin, ate together, and spent a good part of the day playing board games and lounging around. It wasn't until around 2 or 3 in the afternoon that we decided to go check out one of the trails near the property. We knew we didn't have too much daylight left. Sunset was coming earlier by then, so we kept our plans casual. The walk started off really pleasant. The air was cool and clean, the breeze was light, and the scenery was beautiful. The area wasn't completely alpine, so there were still some touches of fall color clinging to the lower trees, which added a bit of warmth to the otherwise frosty landscape. We even had a few playful snowball fights where the snow was thicker, but for the most part, we just walked in a kind of peaceful silence, enjoying the surroundings. The trail itself was wide and surprisingly well maintained for how little traffic it seemed to get. As the sun started to dip, we turned around to head back to the cabin. At some point during the walk back, I ended up falling behind the others. My wife had joined my sister and her husband in a conversation, and I just let myself drift about 30 feet behind them, hands in my pockets, quietly taking in the last bits of autumn color nestled beneath the pine trees. After a while, something started to feel off. The usual sounds of the forest seemed muted somehow. It wasn't full-on winter yet, so there were still a few animals moving around, but the natural background noise, birds, wind, distant rustling, felt like it had dropped off noticeably. Curious, I slowed down a little more and drifted farther behind the group. That turned out to be a mistake. The quiet deepened. Gradually, it reached a point where everything just stopped completely. Not a sound, no birds, no animals, not even the wind. It was like the whole forest had gone still. Even the air itself felt heavier, like it was harder to breathe. That's when I started to panic. I've never felt so unsettled in the outdoors before. I know it sounds like a cliche, but I got this overwhelming sense that I was being watched. The back of my neck felt cold, and my instincts were screaming at me that something was behind me. I froze. Literally just stopped walking. I don't know if it was fear or some deeper gut reaction, but I couldn't bring myself to move. Then something broke the silence. It was subtle, but after that level of stillness, I noticed it instantly. A faint rustling sound coming from behind me and off to the right, like a pine cone falling or something small shifting in the brush. But what really got to me was what came right after. A voice. At least I think it was a voice. It sounded off. Not quite right, like something trying to sound human, but not quite pulling it off. It reminded me of an AI-generated voice, vaguely feminine, but with this uncanny artificial edge. I couldn't even understand the words, but just hearing it made my skin crawl. I didn't stick around to investigate. My fight or flight response kicked in hard, and I bolted to catch up with the group. I didn't even stop to look back. I wasn't sure what had just happened, and I didn't care. I just wanted to be near other people. When I rejoined them, no one had noticed anything strange. Not wanting to seem paranoid or scared over nothing, I didn't mention what I'd experienced. I just stuck close to them for the rest of the walk, closer than I normally would, and even tried to stay out front when I could. I couldn't shake how shaken I felt. Could it have been a bear? Some other animal? My mind raced with possibilities, but nothing really made sense. Once we got back to the cabin, I started to calm down a little. The sun was setting, and a light snow had started to blow in. It made the evening feel cozy, almost comforting. We settled in for the night. I didn't bring up what had happened. I pushed it aside and tried to convince myself it had all been in my head. That night only added fuel to the growing fire of unease I'd been feeling. It was sometime around midnight or maybe 1 a.m., and the snow had started coming down hard, almost alarmingly so. I was the only one still awake, lying in my cot next to a window, watching the snowfall pile up quickly. I remember hoping we'd still be able to drive out the next morning if it kept up like this. But as I sat there, staring out at the snow, that same unsettling feeling crept back in. About 20 yards from the cabin was the edge of the tree line. In the dim light, just enough to make out movement, I could see the branches shifting. Not wildly, not in a way that screamed animal, but there was definite motion out there. I couldn't see anything clearly at first, but I could sense it. Something was there. And after what had happened earlier in the day, it put me immediately on edge. That familiar chill crept up my neck again. I kept my eyes locked on that spot for a long time. Maybe 20 minutes passed after the movement stopped. As my eyes adjusted to the low light, the details slowly started to come into focus. And that's when I saw them. Eyes, two pale, unblinking eyes, reflecting what little light there was. cold, empty white dots just above the underbrush, staring directly at my window. They didn't flicker, didn't blink, didn't shift, just watched. I must have been staring back at them for at least another 5 seconds, frozen in place, heart pounding so loud it felt like it was echoing in my chest. Then I turned over in my cot, slowly, carefully, away from the window. My eyes were wide, and my whole body had tensed up. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to move. I didn't want whatever that thing was to know I'd seen it. I felt like if I acknowledged it, it would do something. So I stayed frozen. That was all I could do. I lay there for the rest of the night, completely still. I didn't sleep. I couldn't, not with that thing watching. I didn't even want to look back to see if the eyes were still there. I just stared into the darkness inside the cabin, listening to the wind and the snow, heart racing, on edge until morning. The next morning, I suggested we pack up and head home because of the snow. Though, of course, that wasn't the real reason. I just wanted to get out of there. As we loaded up the cars, I felt this nagging pull to check the tree line outside the window where I'd seen those eyes. I didn't really want to, but I had to know if anything was there. The snow had covered much of the ground, but even so, I found something. Footprints. Bipedal ones. The snow made it hard to tell much. No detail, no tread, nothing distinct, but they were definitely there. Human-like in form, but spaced oddly. I didn't linger to study them. I just wanted to leave as fast as I could. After that experience, things only got worse for me. Every time I went out into the woods, I felt more paranoid. I started noticing strange little things, those unnatural silences again, and that persistent feeling of being watched, but never as intensely as on that trip. Still, each time it happened, the pit in my stomach grew deeper. My senses became more heightened, especially while hiking. Even then, I still wasn't entirely sure it was real. A part of me kept trying to rationalize it all, convince myself it was just in my head. But with each strange encounter, that doubt chipped away bit by bit. Roughly 2 years later, something else happened. This one stood out, another significant experience, and it occurred not far from my uncle's property. By then, my wife and I had gotten married. This was in the late autumn or early winter again. We were out on a 4-day fishing trip, staying at a group campground near a fairly popular lake. My sister, her husband, and a few cousins from my mom's side had joined us. I'd brought my German Shepherd, Yukon, along. Even though I grew up hunting and had no shortage of experience with firearms, I'd never been someone who liked carrying them. I usually relied on Yukon for a sense of security. He was calm, well-behaved, and friendly, but he had sharp instincts. If something wasn't right, he'd know. And he gave me the kind of peace of mind others get from having a weapon on them. After what I'd been through, I usually tried to stick with others when out in the woods. But with Yukon at my side, I felt confident enough to go out on my own sometimes. Besides, this campground was pretty popular. There were people around, and I could always see other campsites across the lake. That afternoon, still with plenty of daylight left, I decided to take a walk with Yukon around the lake. It was peaceful, calm. I felt good, confident. My mistake came when Yukon veered off toward a creek that branched away from the trail, and I let him. There was more snow on the ground this time than during the incident near my uncle's property, but it still wasn't deep enough to be a serious issue. Yukon didn't seem to have any trouble moving through it. What caught my attention, though, was that he wasn't just following the creek. He was tracking something. It was clear he'd picked up a scent trail, and whatever it was, he was determined to follow it. He was focused, moving with purpose. So I followed him. Then it happened again. This time, the silence didn't come on gradually. It hit all at once. One moment, the woods were alive with the usual subtle sounds, breeze in the trees, faint bird calls, and the next, everything just stopped. The wind died. The forest fell completely silent, and once again the air turned dense and heavy, like I was suddenly underwater. Yukon felt it too. His ears flattened immediately, and he started to whimper, clearly disturbed. My heart began to race. I could feel panic rising in my chest. I was seconds away from breaking into a sprint when that old familiar feeling returned. Something was watching us. I could feel it in my spine. Yukon began barking wildly, more ferociously than I'd ever seen. He was snarling now, fully on edge. I was frozen for a moment, trying to decide whether to run. Then I heard it. A voice. It sounded female again, eerily familiar, like a distorted mix between my sister and my wife. It was slurred, off, not quite human. But this time, I could clearly make out the words. They came from about 15 yards ahead. "I'm over here. Can you come help? I need help. Please help." That was it. My instincts finally took over. I stumbled backward, barely able to keep my footing in the snow, and turned to run. Yukon was beside me, barking and snarling like something was right on our heels. The panic was full-blown now. My only thought was to get back to the main trail, to the campsite, anywhere but there. And as we ran, I swear I could feel something chasing us. The heavy atmosphere didn't lift right away. I could hear rustling in the trees and underbrush behind us, quick, erratic movements that didn't match anything natural. Yukon kept making noise, barking and growling as we sprinted. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what was following. Eventually, though I don't know how long it actually was, the feeling started to fade. The weight in the air lifted, the silence cracked open, and just like that, the world came back to normal. A few moments later, we came upon another group of hikers on the trail. They were clearly startled by the sight of me and Yukon, both of us out of breath, wild-eyed, clearly shaken. I'm sure we looked completely wrecked. But I didn't stop to explain. I didn't care how it looked. I just wanted to get away. I wanted to tell the hikers that something had been chasing us, that we were in danger, but I couldn't get the words out. It just sounded too insane. Voices in the woods, being stalked by something. No one was going to believe me. In the moment, I think I blurted out some excuse, maybe said we were just out for a jog. They didn't look entirely convinced, but they didn't press the issue. They let Yukon and me walk back to the campground with them, and for that, I'll always be grateful. But I knew the truth now. Things were only getting worse. Whatever this was, it was stalking me. I had considered the possibility of a serial killer at one point, but something about that didn't add up. This didn't feel human. It felt animal in a way I couldn't explain. Those eyes I saw, they weren't human eyes, not even close. And then there was the silence, that dead silence where even the wind disappeared and the air pressed in like a weight. That wasn't something a person could create. By this time, I was developing what I can only describe as clinical paranoia. But it wasn't constant. It only really flared up when I was in or near the woods, especially mountainous areas. And still, I kept it to myself. I didn't tell anyone, not even my wife. I was the skeptic, the rationalist, the one who always insisted there was a logical explanation for everything. If I started telling people what I was experiencing, they'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. There was still a small part of me that believed it might be all in my head. Maybe a side effect of some medication or a lingering psychological thing. Hell, I even entertained the idea of some elaborate prank, something twisted and drawn out. But that all changed this past winter. That's when everything became real, undeniably real. It happened during a snowmobiling trip. To this day, I don't know why I agreed to go. I think I got pressured into it. I tried to make excuses, said I had work, other responsibilities, but my dad knew I was free. He knows me well, and somehow I caved. He wanted me to join him and a friend of his on an overnight trip to do some ice fishing. The date was set, and on the morning we were supposed to leave, my heart was already pounding way harder than it should have been. During the trek, I stuck as close as possible to the other two snowmobiles. Whenever I could, I made sure to ride between them, never in front, never in the back. My paranoia was at an all-time high, and I wasn't taking any chances. I was alert, cautious, constantly checking my surroundings. But fate had other plans. As the sun began to set, the weather turned. Snow started falling hard. Visibility dropped quickly. I was still positioned between my dad's friend in the lead and my father behind me. But my snowmobile began acting up, something mechanical, I wasn't sure, and I gradually started to fall behind the lead sled. I didn't panic at first. My dad was still behind me, and I could still see the lead's tracks in the snow. I figured I'd be fine. I was very, very wrong. I stopped my snowmobile and hopped off to inspect the issue, fully expecting my dad to pull up behind me within seconds, but he didn't. As soon as I cut the engine, I realized how completely quiet everything had become. The falling snow was thick, muffling every sound, and the light was fading fast. I was alone. Really alone. My pulse quickened. Then came the silence, not just quiet, but that same unnatural, oppressive silence I'd felt before. It dropped over me like a blanket, heavy, crushing. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels full of something you can't see. The air grew heavier with it, like I was trying to breathe underwater. And then from the tree line to my left, I heard her voice. My wife's voice. "Come here, it's me. I need you." It was gentle, familiar, comforting, but wrong. I grabbed my flashlight from my pack and whipped it toward the sound, my hands shaking. What I saw next is something I'll never unsee. At first glance, it looked like a pile of pale, twisted tree limbs, jagged, angular, almost like driftwood dusted in snow. But then I saw them, 2 pinpricks of light, eyes reflecting back at me through the darkness, and in that moment, I knew exactly what I was really looking at. It stood at least 6 feet tall, maybe more. It was bipedal, but nothing about it looked remotely human. Its skin was pale, almost grayish, and looked dead, stretched too tightly over a thin, bony frame. It seemed like if it made the wrong move, its bones would tear straight through its skin. Its eyes were deeply sunken, its cheeks hollow, and its lips were thin and cracked, with something dark, dried and black, caked at the corners. But what I remember most vividly were its hands. Its fingers were unnaturally long. Everything about it was inhuman, but the hands were worse, and they ended in huge, curved, black claws. When my flashlight hit it, it let out a scream. This ungodly, unnatural shriek that rattled my bones. I truly believed I was about to die. Without even thinking, I dropped the flashlight and lunged back onto my snowmobile. I started it faster than I ever have in my life. I didn't care where I was going, didn't care where my father or his friend were. I just hit the throttle and pushed the machine to its limit. I had to get away. I never looked back. After a few minutes of riding like a man possessed, I finally remembered to turn on my GPS. I aimed straight for the parking lot where we'd left the cars and didn't slow down for a second. I couldn't tell you how long it took or even what time it was by then. All I know is that it was completely dark. When I got to the lot, I jumped off my snowmobile and into my car faster than I thought was physically possible. I tore out of there without a second thought. I didn't feel even a shred of safety until I got home, nearly half an hour later. And even then, the fear didn't go away. I was still shaking, still replaying the image of that thing, the thing that had been stalking me. After that, everything's kind of a blur. I remember locking all the doors. I remember lying in bed, wide awake, unable to sleep. But I didn't tell anyone what had happened, not even my wife. I told my dad that I'd gotten separated and decided to head back on my own. He ended up picking up my snowmobile since he had the trailer. And now I'm at a crossroads. I haven't gone near the woods since. No forests, no mountains, nothing. I don't want to. I can't. But my family, they're starting to plan camping trips again. They're talking about going back out there. And I don't know how to tell them I'm not going. I don't know how to tell them they shouldn't go either. I don't want anyone to know where this happened, not because I'm protecting it, but because I don't want anyone going looking for it. I don't want my family or anyone else to end up like me. I want to warn them. I want to protect them, but I don't know how to start. So thank you for reading this, and thank you genuinely if you believe me. If you have any advice, anything at all, I'd really appreciate it. I need to figure out what to do. People need to know that there's something out there, something evil,